Hello and welcome to Data Management. This is Module 2, Part 5. In this segment, we're going to learn about the group by function. We're going to learn a little bit more about aggregate functions in general, and then finally about the having clause, which is typically used with group by. The group by command is used when you want to work with subgroups of data. So for example, if we have a list of customers, maybe we want to find out how many customers we have in each state. So we'd want to group the customers by state so that we could count the number of customers in each state. This also allows us to use aggregate commands, so as I mentioned, counting, average, sum, and so on subgroups of the table. So let's assume that we've added a sector attribute to this type of stock. So for each company, we're going to put them in a specific sector. So for example, we've got Apple is now in the tech sector, BB&T Commercial Bank is in the bank sector, and so on. What this allows us to do is to say, okay, we can do calculations and computations and count and aggregate and so on the entire table, or using the group by command, we can look at just subgroups. So in this case, we've got the command select sector, count share firm from share group by sector. What this does is, as you can see, it groups the entire list by sector. In this case, we have multiple sectors defined. And then for each one, it counts the number of shares within that particular sector. So just to practice, here's one that does not include, the first one does not include any use of group by. So it's just write a query that finds all the firms that include Inc. in the firm name. And then the second one is to write a query that displays the average share price by sector. So in the first one, do you recall how we compare values? Well, it's again using the reg expression. So in this case, we would say select star from share, where share firm reg express Inc., and that would give us the values we're looking for. The second one, if you recall, we're trying to find all the average share price for each sector, rather than the average share price for all of the shares in the table. If you take a look at this query, again, we're going to select the sector name, the average share price from share, and then what we've added here is group by sector. If we run that query with and without the part in red, you'll see that we get very different responses. So if we run select sector, average share price from share, and just leave it at that, we get a single value, so we've got average share price. What do you think this average share price represents? Well, it's actually the average share price for all of the shares that are in our table. This sector with tech showing is actually rather meaningless, because what that value is, it's just the sector name for the very first share in the table. With our second SQL query, we've got select sector, average share price from share. Now we're adding in group by sector. And you can see in this case, it's showing the sector name and the average share price for all of the shares within that sector. So if we have 2 shares in the sector, it'll give the average price of the 2 of them. So notice the difference between these two responses. Now the sector name actually is meaningful. What it says is, okay, within the banking sector, all the shares within that, the average share price for them is 30.28. We almost always use group by with aggregate queries. So basically what it means is, if we've got a total list, as I mentioned before, of customers or countries or shares or whatever it might be, we typically might want to do some kind of calculation or computation or aggregate function on the entire group, or we might want to do it on a subgroup. So for example, in the assignment 1 that you're going to be turning in for me, we've got a list of all countries, and we've got information such as the name, capital, continent, the language that's spoken, the population of the country, and so on. Well, if we issue this query, select star from countries, group by continent, what it does is give us each continent listed once. Now, this listing is actually not too meaningful, because what it's doing is it's taking the country, the first country that's listed in our table for that specific continent, and displaying information for that country alone. Without having any kind of aggregate command in here, it's really not that meaningful to group it by continent. So in this case, let's look at one where we do select sector and then average share price from share, group by sector. Again, what that gives us is the sector name and the average share price for all of the shares that are within that sector. So this would be an example of where you would want to use the group by, and you are pairing the group by command with an aggregate function, in this case average. In this case, we're doing select share from sector, average share price from share, and group it by the sector. Well, once again, we're getting the sector name and the average share price, but now we've got a share firm name, BB&T Commercial Bank, General Electric. What does this mean? Well, it's really not meaningful in the context of this query, because all it's doing is displaying the first bank listed in our table, which isn't really meaningful when we're looking for the average share price for the sector. The having clause is typically used with group by, and it's allowing us to put restrictions or constraints, or restricting the number or type of rows that are being returned, or records that are being returned. So before we used select some attributes from some table where certain conditions apply. Here it's very similar. We're going to say group by and then having certain constraints. So let's say from a previous example we want to display sectors that have an average share price of more than $50. So once again we select sector, average share price. Now we're going to give it a name, average share price, from share, group by sector, and now we're adding the constraint of having average share price greater than 50. And you can see what happens this time. We still have the sector listed and the average share price, but now we're restricting only those sectors where the average share price is greater than 50. And that is the end of Data Management, Chapter 2, Part 5.